Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Carl Fisher. I'm the CMO at DVT. Welcome to another DVT Insights session. We have a rather special session for you today with Ian and Alexandre of Emergent, all the way from Sao Paulo in Brazil. So welcome, gentlemen, to the session today. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really a privilege and a great pleasure to have you today, particularly given the topic that you're going to be talking about. Our audience, I'm sure, would all love to be off mute. Sorry, that's my fault that you can't shout out and say welcome to Ian and Alexandre, but we will allow you to pose questions later today. I'm going to give you a quick intro to Ian and Alexandre. They will then lead us through the session today, and at the end, they'll be taking your questions. If you do have questions during the session, please do raise those through the chat window. I will pick those up and pose those through to Alexandre and Ian as they come through, without much more time wasting on my part, because I know you're all here to hear the gentleman speak and not me. Ian and Alexandre represent Emergent, a consulting organization. Both of them have extensive experience in the Agile space. More importantly, they have experience in terms of what it takes to be successful with Agile within organizations. Emergent, being their consulting company, is now a part of the digital transformation, and I think the digital project side of Itaú Bank in Brazil, which happens to be the largest bank within Brazil, and I believe in Latin America as well. And on that basis, Ian, Alexandre, is probably a really good point to hand over to you and let you take it away today to talk to our audience. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you very much, Carl.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here, and I'll pass over to Alexandre, who's the founder of Emergent, and we've been recently acquired by Itaú Bank for the last couple of months. It was early September this happened, so we're still finding our feet in Itaú. But one of the reasons that Itaú was so interested in Emergent is about how Emergent was dealing with business agility and complexity and all these things. So we're going to have a quick walkthrough. So Ali will give us this guided tour to some of the backstage of how Emergent perceives this and everything. So I'll hand it over to you, Ali, and then we'll be able to answer questions as we go along.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Carl. For us, as like Ian was saying, it's a pleasure to be here, and in order to share some of our background and experiences and some stories on business agility and how Agile and all the things related are being really important for organizational transformation. Yeah. So I have here some slides that I'm going to use in the background just to facilitate our storytelling. But the main idea is not to kill you with loads of slides, and so the idea is more having some kinds of conversations and bringing some key points that we understand that you have to keep in mind when leading some business agility movement or project in your organizations. Well, like we're saying, so here a little bit about ourselves. We are part of the Emergent team, worldwide consultants company specialized on business agility. So basically here you have myself and Ania, and like a combination of skills. So I'm somebody that came from software development industry and started with the Agile things 17 years ago. And Ian is much more connected to the complexity things in Cynefin and etc. And during our presentation, you understand why this combination is so important in order to guarantee the success of your business agility initiatives. Yeah. So just in a nutshell about myself, 17 years with Agile, certified Scrum trainer from Scrum Alliance since 2008. And I have also published the book on Learn 3.0 on how to use emergent learning to help you with your Agile initiatives. So a little bit about you, Ian.
Yeah, just quickly, I was honored while I was there, while Emergent was, before it was acquired, I was honored to be the executive director of Emergent. And I also had a really amazing experience previous to that with Cognitive Edge, where I was doing a lot of training with Cynefin and practitioner, as well as their complexity tool SenseMaker. So adding all these things together with some of the consultancy work I was doing before, and it's about 6 years that I've been working and looking at systems as complex systems rather than just with other titles. So just to put on the complexity lens has been very helpful over the last few years. So that's the way we perceive and look at systems, is through those that viewpoint.
It's great. Yeah. So like Cora was saying at the very beginning, we were recently acquired by Itaú Bank, the largest bank in Latin America. And one of the reasons that we were acquired is exactly doing our expertise in business agility, and the different way that we are using to do this. So as we see during this presentation, most of companies or agile professionals are use it to implement business agility by introducing new frameworks or trying to replace some methods. But actually, in our perspective, business agility is much more related to the context of the companies that we're trying to do this. So you have to starting from the context and then come up with new models and methods, and not trying to copy paste methods and frameworks for copying a model that who are working in other organizations and trying to just input this into yours. So we'll talk more about this, but this was one of the reasons that we are now part of Itaú, in order to introduce this background on working with business agility in a more contextualized way, and helping this large bank to move faster to the agile objectives. So in order to talk a little bit more on business agility, we have to move a little bit from to the past in order to remember why the agile thing started here. So why agile was so important for our communities, and what were the kind of problems that we were trying to resolve when it all started. Yeah. So basically, when you're thinking what does agile means, one of the first things that come in my mind, and I think that it's the same for most of you, is about the Agile Manifesto. Yeah, and all the things that happened during the 90s. And it was always starting in the software development industry, if you remember. Yeah, so during the 90s, we were facing a software development crisis. I was a programmer at that time, and it was really, really a bad job to be a programmer at that time, because most of our projects were going to fail. Yeah, it doesn't matter how effort you apply on it. It was working day in, day out, weekend in, weekend out, and in the end, the project didn't deliver something useful. So most of the time, the clients were looking to your face and say, no, it was not what we asked for. It's obsolete. It's not going to work out anymore. So actually, it was a pain to work with software development at that time. And then some software engineers started to trying out and experiment some different stuff. Yeah, if you remember, we were used to working in what nowadays we call waterfall. Yeah, so basically, the life cycle of a software development project was like gathering requirements and then doing some analysis and architecture and programming and testing and so on. And it was really a long journey. So that was why by the end, the software was not good enough. Yeah, and the project was going to fail. So that software engineers, they started to experiment some different things. Nowadays, those things are called like Scrum, probably extreme programming, XP, FDD, feature-driven development, and Crystal and others. But just to make it short, the point is, when we started with the agile things during the 90s, we had a clear purpose and a clear goal to achieve. We have also a very known context because, you know, the problems with software development industry was the same in Brazil or in the UK or in South Africa or in the US. So if you talk at that time, if you talk to a software developer in any part of the world and ask about their pains, the answer would be probably very close, probably the same. Yeah. So, okay, clients never know what they want. Requirements are going to change. Too many working hours. You know, technology move faster than ourselves and things like that. So the context was very clear. So that's why, you know, the manifesto was so to the point, because it speaks exactly the language that us software developers were trying to listen to. So, okay, let's focus more in people and less on documentation. So let's be ready to respond to change and not just following the plan and things like that. So the thing is, all this movement became bigger and bigger and bigger. And frameworks like Scrum became very, very, very popular. You know, if you talk to me like 15 years ago, if you talk to me, hey, Alex, and in 15 years, you as an agile guy is going to be acquired by the largest bank in Brazil, I would say, come on, you're nuts, insane. It doesn't make any sense. Because, you know, at that time, our goal with Agile was not to transform the market. It was not to transform organizations, business, and things like that. Actually, our ambitions was very, very small. We just wanted to improve our profession. Yeah, that was the point. We loved to develop software, and our profession was really, we were not doing great because, you know, it was a pain. So if Agile helped ourselves to get a better job with a better profession and working in six-fold projects, it's done, fixed. But the thing is, Scrum and Agile and XP and later Kanban and all these things became very, very, very popular. It started to get some traction and some great results in the organization. So here, if you look into my drawing, so this, you know, this black marks. So just picture that this is a drawing of your organization, yeah. And just in the corner of that, there were some guys trying to implement Scrum. They were doing this on software development. So it's like IT department, really in the backstage, you know, that guys were, you know, following some manifesto and running some sprints and, you know, some stick notes on the wall and things like that. And the results were improving and were improving and were improving. So thing is that the rest of the organization was looking to their guys and say, hey, I want this as well. If that guys were able to improve, why not myself? Yeah. So that's exactly where it started all the things all the things on copying the ideas of the Agile Manifesto and bring this to other departments or areas of the organization. So we started to listen to things like 8R Agile, Agile marketing, Agile 8R, Agile infrastructure, and et cetera, Agile executive teams and things like that. Actually, the idea was the excitement behind the Scrum and Agile things were so huge that everybody wants some piece of this. And then we started to try things like that. Okay, so let's start to implement Scrum everywhere, or let's just try to introduce Kanban everywhere. And let's put the Agile Manifesto in all the walls across the organization. With that, people will start to grow an Agile mindset, and we are going to nurture an Agile culture. Yeah, so it was like a dream comes true. So everybody wants to be like IT guys. Everybody wants to copy our process. Yeah, but this is just the beginning of the story. Yeah, because actually, unfortunately, the result of this movement, of this part of the movement, was not so good, because companies started to invest a lot of energy on Agile and implementation across the whole organizations. And the results didn't come. Yeah, You know, if you talk to people who are leading, you know, agile business agility transformation, agile transformation in large organization, and you asking for concrete results, most of them don't have this to show, don't have this to share. Although they have, oh, things are nice, people are enjoying their job most. Now they are organized in cross-functional teams. They are not a department anymore. There are no silos anymore. So now we have tribes, now we have squads, now we have things like that. Okay, so show them the numbers. Where are the results? What were the problems that we are really resolving on these movements? Most of them is in silence, yeah? So this is the problem, that, you know, Agile was a huge success on the software development and IT industry. It's done. Our profession was improved, fixed, resolved, yeah? But then we started to move to the rest of the organization or the rest of the market, yeah? So actually the idea was starting to copy all the agile principles, values, methods, etc., and spread it across organizations. And some people call this business agility. In our perspective, it's not business agility. It's pretty much agile for business, because you are trying, like I said, just copy paste. You want to have worked for the software development industry and introduce this to the rest of the companies. But there is one very thing here called context, yeah? And when we're talking about business, things are much more context dependent than in software development. Don't forget that during the 90s and the very beginning of this movement, the problems and the pains on the software development industry, they were pretty much the same all over the world. We were facing the same kind of problems, the same kind of situation. So that's why Agile was spot on. The manifesto was spot on. But when you're talking about business problems, we have so many different kinds of business out there. We have companies with very different goals and different proposals. We have companies that just want to survive, and we have companies that want to grow and grow and grow and faster. We have companies who want to make money and double the result, their financial results. And we have companies where, you know, financial is not the key thing now, because we have very rich investors. So we just want to gain more users and followers and things like that. So that's the trick thing, because business is very, very context dependent, while software development is pretty much the same. So, okay, is that clear? What about business agility then? Well, if that thing is agile for business, what exactly is business agility? Well, that was exactly what we were talking for. Yeah? So agility, and when we're talking about business, it's make much more sense talking about agility than about agile. Yeah, we have to keep in mind that business agility is not about implement Scrum all over the organization. Neither Kanban. It's not about bring things from the agile movement into the business. Actually, it's the other way around. It's understand the business, understand what are the anti-patterns that we have for agility here to respond to change quickly, and then respond it, you know. So why is agility is important for the business? Well, it's quite simple, because, you know, companies in a very complex world, companies need more and more. Companies need to respond quick to the changes who are arising everywhere. And if they don't have agility, how can they respond this? And just to get it clear, when you're talking about agility, is much more about the movement, you know, the movement that you are able to do when you face new conditions. Actually, if you revisit, you know, Adam Smith, you see that agility is something that is part of the business since the very beginning, since the theory of entrepreneurship. Yeah. So actually, it's not something new. I'm used to say that all business all business have agility. The challenge here is to discover if that level of agility that they have is enough and is in tune with their business goals. Because if it's not, you have to make some changes and you have to, provide some models on, emerge with something will help the company to get that. And actually, there is also other point. There are some companies who are applying and investing so much energy on becoming more agile that they are forget about the other things. Yeah, I have more and more seen companies who are really great in running squads and tribes and with agile codes everywhere. They are doing really bad on the business. Yeah, so this is not business agility. This is not you cannot evaluate if your business has agility or not by taking a look on the practice that they are using or how are they organized, if they have teams or departments or things like that, where like I said, so business is very, very context dependent. And that's exactly the reason that like 8 years ago I realized that if I wanted to succeed in this move from agile to business agility, I had to learn much more about context understanding. And that's where I started my connection with complexity theory, Knaving, and things like that. And that was exactly why when we founded Emergent, we decided that all our business agility strategy would be focused on starting from the context and then come up with models. So models should come in an emergent way and not as an imposition. So nothing things like, oh, let's apply safe or let's apply less. No. Let's start with the context. Let's understand what's the level of agility that we already have here, because this company has a legacy. Every company has a legacy, and there are some good stuff on that legacy. So let's understand where we are. Let's understand exactly what is our sense of direction for the next steps. And then let's emerge with appropriated practice for this. And that's where exactly I start my story with Ian here. Yeah. So in that time, my company was like a bunch of agile people, agile coaches, most of ourselves passionate on agile movement and things like that. And then realize, hey, we have to stop a little bit of this, because if we are so passionate about agile, we are going to be blinded with other stuff. So let's learn more about complexity, about sense making, about all the context, all the things that can help ourselves to understand more about context, and then we'll be ready to the next step. So and then Ian joined our team and bringing us a lot about sense making, these things about context dependence. With you, Ian.
Cool. Thank you, Ale. It's always great to hear the story told again, and it was fascinating also because I don't have an agile background, and when I joined Emergent, I asked Ale, should I do a Scrum Master course? Should I become a product owner? Or should I do all these roles and stuff? And I said no, don't do that. You'll get changed forever. And Emergent is a well-known school and everything, so there were great opportunities to do that, but. It was important to be able to bring the ideas from looking at complex systems, from looking at the system from a complex adaptive perspective. And that idea of context is everything. It sounds so, we say it all the time, and we all know it, that context is important, but we forget about the context that's actually there. So generally, our experiences when we're talking to leaders and stuff, they believe that they see the whole context. And I think that's part of the point when the different approaches that help you make better sense. So the sense making of context is so important, because so many times, with all the best intentions, the leadership or the board of governors, they have a certain perception of where they think that they are, where they think they are in relationship with the market, and therefore they see the path that they should be taken, but it's not necessarily the case. So the biases that are involved, and because it's complex systems, and it's the system is greater than the sum of its parts, of its parts, we can't ever see the whole system. We have to make an active move to try and map more of the system to be able to understand its context. And therefore, when Ali is going to talk a little bit further about how do we counter map, how do we understand the agility, where there are pains, whether we've got sort of knots in the system that we can release. And maybe some of these can be supported by Scrum, but maybe not. Maybe traditional methods like waterfall or other approaches or whatever it is will become more self-evident. So it's a bit about how can the system become perceive itself, and so that it can take a next possible step. And of course, we have the stories and the narratives based on the different clients. But Emergy, and also now what the work we're doing in the bank, we don't come with a set of best practices. This is what's going to solve. This worked in a bank in South Africa, therefore it'll work in Brazil. It's great to have a chat with a bank in South Africa and learn about what they did and gain a second perspective, but not necessarily the success of one bank in South Africa will guarantee it here, and so far and so forth. So that idea of context is fascinating, but of course it means your learning journey never ends. You never get a diploma. Okay, now I understand banking, therefore I can implement XYZ in a bank. Every bank and every time, and even the same bank, Ita will not be the same in 6 months' time. It'll not be the same in 12 months' time. It'll constantly. So it has to be understand. It's a bit like much more like sort of permaculture, or like even like a more natural remedies. You're constantly looking. The weeds of today may not be the weeds of tomorrow. The insects that attack your crop today may be different next season. So it's a constant process of making sense of where you are and making those adjustments.
Yeah.
Back to you, Lale.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And it exactly represents our current situation. So everybody out there is asking ourselves, so what are we going to implement in Itaú? Are you going to use this method or that method? And our answer is, we don't know, because we are make sense of the context. And make sense is not like analysis. We are not making an analysis to provide an answer. Yeah, we are make senses in order to create the right space to let the methods and model to emerge in an appropriate way. Yeah. And don't forget that, like Ian was saying, that you should be open for, if you're talking about business agility and not about agile movement, you should be open and respectful to all the other methods out there and all the other structures out there. We have a lot of examples of really large organizations who are very traditional and with things like hierarchy and departments, and they still being very innovative, and they still being very, very agile on their, on the way that they respond to the market. So Coca-Cola is an example. So it's a company with a really, really high hierarchy, several levels of management positions, and they still moving fast and being, in tune with what the market needs and respond in a very quickly way. On the other hand, there are a lot of companies out there with very kind of agile structures, and that they are failing in the business because they are not being able to respond to the market. They are not being able to read the weak signals and to respond this in a appropriated velocity. So the very what we usually say is the very pattern for business agility is what we call emergent practice. So those are the practice who emerge for their specific context. So the context should precede the practice. So that's why they are emergent. We start with the context and then we emerge with practice. So nowadays, most of companies, most of people, they are very influenced by the big techs and companies like Amazon. So everybody wants to copy paste the methods created at Amazon. Everybody wants to have roles like Netflix have. Everybody wants to copy something of the product management structure on Netflix. And not to say about Spotify. So Spotify model is, I think that nowadays more popular than Spotify music streaming service. So everywhere people are trying to, to work with squads and tribes and things like that. But one point that people don't follow is that, there was a journey to arrive at that method and that models and that solution. So Amazon, when Amazon started, for example, with DevOps things, or when they started with, a lot of practice that we see there, they had a reason to emerge with that practice. And Amazon was not trying to copy anyone. Amazon was trying to resolve their very own problems. Netflix, the same. When Netflix decided to create their own structure of product management, they are not trying to copy Spotify or Amazon, etc. They were trying to resolve their very own problems and create something in tune with Netflix culture. So basically, things that we have to keep in mind is that every company has an identity that is related with our legacy and who we are. Every company has its own culture, the way that we behave, but not the fluffy things that we draw usually to represent our culture. We're talking about the reality. We are this way. And what is our sense of directions, the problems who are preventing us to get there, and then we respond to the practice. So can you see here that in this journey, the practice is the last step, is the last mile, is the last thing that you have to do. All those companies, all the companies that we adore, that we are following, they are following a journey somehow like this. They are who we are, what we want, what are our problems, and then come up with practice. So you see, the practice are the last step, because there is a journey, from left to right here. Problem is, so if you want to get inspired for that companies, inspired by the companies, you should to follow the complete journey. So okay, so Spotify first, they truly understood who they were, and what exactly was the engineer culture that they were looking for, the directions, the problems, and then they came up with squads, tribes, squad health check and things like that. So problem is that in the market, people are doing this. What, in complex theory, we call a primitive convergence. So they are just trying to copy. So they don't understand exactly why Spotify decided to work with Squad, for example. They just want to copy it. So they grab it and implement it everywhere in the company. So we should keep in mind that something that who working on one specific culture maybe is not going to work in your culture. Maybe Spotify, like somebody said, hey, you are trying to copy Spotify, but Spotify didn't make money yet, and your company wants to double the results in one fiscal year. So the business conditions are completely different just to start the conversation. So what we're proposing is stop just to copy and grab a practice from other people and start to trying to understand your very context in the first place. So this explains why most of Agile implementations, people complained about, our culture is resisting to change and things like that. So there is I would say the most Agile codes everywhere, they are complaining about culture and mindset and people resisting to change. So of course people are resisting to change. We are trying to force some new methods. You are trying to copy something from one music streaming services company in Sweden and implementing to your company who is a bank in Brazil and who need to double the results and blah, blah, blah. So of course people are going to resist. So so here just a link to share with you about one blog post that I wrote about this context dependence and something that you should take a look afterwards. And here, just to finish, well, our strategy is what we call business agility design. Yeah, so we just created, it's not a method, it's not a framework, it's not, you know, a new methodology. It's just our strategy, something that we created to support ourselves in our business agility initiatives. So basically, it's not a framework because, you know, it's not implementing anything. We are not putting something in there. Actually, it's much more a scaffolding. It's like, you know, our clients, and now in case in Itaú, we are not trying to replace things in the first place. Actually, we are placing some scaffolds just around the legacy of the company and the current state and making sense of the context. And then afterwards we come with emergent practice and methods. So we are doing this basically in 3 movements. Yeah, brief, sense, design. In the brief, we work with techniques related to counter mapping in order to understand what are the dominant rumors in that company. You know, this is a very, this is a really a big problem that we have in most of business agility initiatives, because, you know, most decisions are made based on rumors and not based on real data. Yeah. So there are some dominant rumors, something that people are talking across their hallways, and they share it to others. And then when we decide, and when you decided to implement a new method, we are just following the rumors. So when we are doing our brief, we start with counter mapping activities that we show ourselves exactly what are the dominant rumors. So it prevents us of following some traps or following some, you know, bias that can exist in the place. We already have this, and then we move to the sense. Ian, you want to explore here? Here is your place, is your territory.
Yeah, so what's really cool, and I was thinking just now that you know, the sense making actually begins also with the counter mapping before, because you from the and here what's interesting is that we start to make sense of micro narratives, you know, that we collect in the process of the procedure, where we can understand you know, understand the patterns that are appropriate to that one. It can be that company, it can be the department, wherever we choose to choose. So once you understand the patterns and how things flow, what are the identities, what are the rituals, how do people see things, what are the strategies, then these form what we call anti-patterns, and sometimes the heuristics, which are a much better guide to taking next step. It becomes much more self-evident than saying, oh, you have to do that. And it's also less about us as consultants or us saying, oh, we see this, the next step should be that, but more those who are involved in the process. They see these patterns and they see the anti-patterns, and therefore the heuristics are co-created together. And it makes sense, the heuristics, instead of it being, you know, a certain rule, go left or right, it's more about a guiding principle, a rule of thumb, and more about directionality, which is much more in line with agility and in creating that movement. So I think that's a quick overview.
Yeah. Yeah, and then here with this step, after this stage, we have a good understanding about the context. So you know exactly, like Ian was saying, that patterns and heuristics, and now we are ready to respond. So can you see that in the first 2 stages, we didn't talk any word about methods, frameworks, tools, practice, or, you know, Scrum or squad or etc. No, it's not about us. We understand that when we're talking about, when we are following brief and sense, we have to talking about them, not about our methods, our favorite methods, our favorite techniques. We are talking about their context and trying to understand their current situation. So if you want to help that people, we have to first clearly understand where they are and what are the anti-patterns that we have there. And then on the design, the last step, here it's where we start to talk about methods and tools and practice, because here we will create an emergent model. But this emergent model is is a response to that anti-patterns. Yeah, so that's why it's emergent. It was not preceded the context. The context preceded the model. And then we create a very abstract model based on language, propensity, constraints, and recommendations, things that will fight against that anti-patterns. And then the rest of the organizations implement that method, but implement in their very own way, because they have autonomy to include some specific practice that are good for that context. Yeah. So for example, let's say that we have here on the top, on the center on the top, we have a model, and this model is based on constraints and propensities and recommendations. We don't have a practice. And then let's say that the sales department, they need more agility in their business, and they will implement that model. But that model is not, it's not a library of methods. It's just a set of constraints. So they have to decide what practice to use in order to respond in order to be in compliance with the model, let's say. So that's why in companies who, implement agility, business agility this way, it's going to be commonplace to have, like, for example, a bunch of people organized in teams and other people organized in areas, functional areas. And it's all right, because they are doing the best for their very context, but they are connected with the model in the center. Yeah. So in a nutshell, business agility is not about using agile practice across the whole organization. Yeah. So it's a different movement. Business agility is about resilience and competitiveness. Yeah. Especially when facing ever-changing markets. Business agility process should not be just copy-pasted from other companies. They are very context-dependent. Embrace emergence, using scaffolding for continuous brief sense design into you and not frameworks. Frameworks are great for agile and for software development stuff, but frameworks are not a good structure for business agility. Scaffolding work in the best way. Okay, just a final words, next step. So as we were acquired by Itaú recently, so during the negotiations, we guaranteed that this business agility structure is going to be published as an open source through Creative Commons. So stay tuned, because in January next year, we're going to launch this all the the new site with contacts and etc. And it's going to be open for the whole community to get it together and share experience and follow and implement this in their very projects. That's it. Thank you very much. We are open for questions now.
Well, Ian, Alex, thank you so much for that presentation. That's certainly a lot to think about, and certainly fascinating stuff that you presented there. For our audience, if you would please, if you have questions for Alex and Ian, just drop those in on the chat window and I'll pick those up and pose those through to Ian and Alex as you're probably thinking about what you want to ask at this point. I'll just, if I may, Ian, Alex, I'll throw in a question or two myself at the start. I guess one of the things that I saw in the, and I'm hesitant to say approach, but in the scaffolding that you bring to the consideration of agility within a business, it almost seems to me to reflect a change management approach to working with an organization to really appreciate its culture, to appreciate its history and its context in order to take it on this journey. Was that sort of an intention behind what you put together, or was that something that evolved through the process of engaging with companies in this fashion?
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if Ian has a different perspective of mine, but yeah, it was somehow the intention, but it was not planned, I would say. It's much more like a side effect based on what we were trying to do in the very beginning. We were trying to implement like frameworks and methods and etc. And when you see the level of resistance, yeah, and every time we have to blame about the culture, we have to blame about people's mindset, we have to blame. So every time the thing, became this way, we realized, oh, probably we are doing something wrong. Because the first time that it happened, it's all right. So it was that company what was a problem. But if you try to do it this way, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and every place that you are trying to implement business agility, you see that kind of resistance. So probably you are wrong, not that people. And then, by learning more about complex theory and sense making and things like that. So with cognitive edge guys that Ian was saying before, they introduced us the concept of scaffolding. And then we realized, here there is something really, really that we understand that can be helpful. And then we start to make some experiments and try to connect the theory and experiment something in the practice. And it was spot on at some point. So that was why people are so resistant. The structure framework, they have to arrive with, it's not a destruction, but like in a speech. So, everything that you are doing is wrong. You have to replace to this new thing. And of course, people are resisting with this speech.
Just to add to that, which is I find fascinating, what you mentioned about change management. It seems to be, theoretically, Ale and Emergent could have invoiced as well for the change management, because it seems to be a spin-off. It's a bit like using a sort of a oblique approach by going through the process of the business agility design. It also was great for the team working, for the insights, for conflict management. There were a whole bunch of things that involved with that. How do we change? But there was never that direct, now you're going to go into a workshop to discuss about change. No, the approach was to, how can we find our patterns? How can we look at ourselves? And therefore, in the process of doing that, there was also change management, change happening within the communities and the people and the different departments working together actually become better at working together in the process of going through this journey together. So it's kind of like a win-win-win in the process.
Great. And I guess the other bit that occurred to me is there's always that well-known comparison of software projects fail in the waterfall approach because of all these things, and look how much more successful agile projects are in terms of how they go about doing things and they address the problems of the past. You said a very clear distinction between being agile and being business agile. I wonder if you anticipate there also being that sort of comparison in the near future of going, successful agile implementation is dependent on these other elements which haven't been considered traditionally in the past, because I think agile's been sort of squarely rooted in software development, etc., and looked at projects in that context as opposed to agile organizations. So would you anticipate there's going to be that kind of look at organizations almost from a research point of view to go, not just the implementation of agile and methodologies such as Scrum is important, but the measures on business agility and success in becoming a transformed agile organization are important, and the way to look at the key success factors that lead towards that are things like context, taking a scaffolding approach, etc. Would you see that as a comparison that would be something you'd be driving out in the future?
Yeah, actually, no, I didn't anticipate that. It was, I have a lot of scars in my body to show, and when trying to implement Agile and just to follow the movement. Don't forget, the beginning of my story with Agile was I was a software developer. Yeah, so as the result was great, I tried to copy-paste it everywhere. So my first strategy, let's say, with business agility was trying to get the excitement of the movement and copy-paste Scrum everywhere and scaling, Scrum at scale and things like that. But the problem was the results didn't came. Yeah. And the results that came when I had some great sponsors and clients in my project, and they were sometimes really rude with me, and thank them for that, because several times when I was used to talk to software guys, I wasn't speaking the same language. Yeah. So hey, here we are getting better results because with sprints we deliver, you know, product increments in a quick way, and blah, blah, blah. And oh yes, it makes a lot of sense. Sorry. And when I talk to business guy that sponsors, and I'll say, hey, look, now we have, you know, you have 85 squads, and we are organizing with tribes, and blah, blah, blah. And then he or she look at me and say, and what? And what improved in my results? My client is still complaining about blah, blah, blah. And I still with this problem, and I still with da, da, da. So it was much more side effects and try to experiment different things. That's something that we were able to anticipate, to be honest.
Okay, Loretta's got a question for you, Alex, Ian, and it probably links very well to what you were just discussing. So what happens if you have already prescribed a tool framework within the context of a business? What's the most effective way to undo the poor practice implementations without demoralizing the organization?
It's a fantastic question. Yeah, so you don't need to undo, yeah? Because, you know, for sure, there are something very useful on that things that you already implemented. Yeah, you just have to change your next steps. But, you know, what we have now, it's what you have, and it's all right. But the problem is your next step, instead of implementing more things and aggregating more and more methods, is starting to make sense of the context first. By making sense, you will clearly see about, you know, the current method that they were using. I had a client like 1 year ago when they were, when I share a presentation very similar to this one. By the end, he was looking at me and say, "Oh, Alex, you know, I'm a little bit sad now and a bit ashamed, to be honest, because I haven't, you know, implemented SAFe in the whole organization, and how should I remove SAFe from the company, because now it's clear why we are not getting results, blah, 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 blah." I say the same answer, you don't need to, but pay attention to now your current state is, you have SAFe implemented and a lot of people suffering with it probably. Start to make sense to understand what exactly is the red flags that we have, what's the problems, and then start to changing from here. So 1 year after this, they still doing things like a release train, yeah? But they are not doing PI planning anymore because they realized that by doing some sense make that PI planning was harmful for a lot of things that they were trying to do. But release train was okay. And the structure of things is now a bit different. So they stop it just to follow the big picture of SAFe and start to make sense. If there is something good, the sense maker will show you, and you keep it with this. Other things will be removed because you will emerge with better practice.
I think that kind of resonated with me earlier on when you were picking on the big examples that people love to go after, right? Facebook's deployment practices and testing in production, Spotify, Netflix, etc. And it almost seems to be a simplified truth to kind of go, you are not Facebook, you are not Napster or Spotify or Netflix. You are a unique organization with your own context and your own requirements and your own priorities, and you need to find your way into being the best agile business that you can be. And I guess that leads into the question for you and Ian, is that it's usually an executive's job to find the answer and go, here is the plan, and it's A and B and C and D, and then we're done, and there's the result. How do you approach changing the mindset in the decision makers to go, what you have is part of your answer already, and we're going to take you on this journey? How do you get them to buy into that?
I could take a quick stab at it before I see. One of the methods that we use with sense making is trying to relay to leaders that it's okay to be confused. It's actually quite good. You know, if you just use those, you know, Knevin, to start off in the confused domain is a good place to know that you don't know. And especially for those things that aren't predictable. So for things that aren't predictable and therefore complex, it's fine not to know. And you should take it a little bit slow, and you should experiment. You should try different things out, hopefully in parallel, and see what works. So the idea is that, well, you have a model that's working, but how can you upgrade it? Where can you find the anti-patterns? And, you know, some anti-patterns, a bit like what Ali was saying, that parts of SAFe may work very well in parts in different departments. So it's an idea of how can we come into our own? Do we have our own model that's a bit of, you know, Adam Smith and a bit of Spotify and a bit of whatever, and something else that we sort of stuck together, but it just works so well that we've actually given it our own name because no one's, you know, we invented it. We sort of entangle it, especially for those things that are highly complex. For those that are very ordered, you know, if you're producing, you know, nuts and bolts, you can definitely go out in the world and find what are the best practices and copy it, because there is theoretically today one way of making, you know, the fastest nut or the fastest bolt. You can certainly gain efficiency, and you can learn from others and copy those methods. But when things move into the space of uncertainty and unpredictability, then it's good for the leader to suggest going in multiple paths simultaneously and finding which one works and understanding the context in and out, right? Ali has something to add to that.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, it's exactly like this. Yeah, just one very simple thing to add, and as we are approaching our final time as well, as you know, when I work with business leaders and also with all the people who are involved in the movement, I try to create some feeling of be proud of yourself. Yeah, because, you know, most of the times actually the people in company are trying to copy practice from other companies. Actually, there is a self-esteem thing here. Yeah, so most of them, they are not proud of where they are. They are not proud of the companies that they are working with, or they are not proud sometimes even about themselves as you know, as agile people or you know, business consultants or things like that. So I'm working with a lot of companies, big companies, and I have to say that in Amazon, you're trying to copy Amazon, you're trying to copy Netflix and Spotify, and I can guarantee to you they are doing a lot of rubbish things there, exactly like you were doing in the company. Everybody is doing a little bit of rubbish out there. So there's no company, there's no perfect company, there's no companies who are doing things perfect, you know. So be proud of your company, be proud of your R and the mission that you have to transform the organization that you are, and take the next step, create a sense of direction and move on. Stop just trying to, you know, look at others and try to copy. It's like in the personal level, if you spend your whole day on the Instagram or Facebook, just, you know, adoring other people or admiring other people and trying to copy their behaviors and their clothes and then things like that. It's not a good thing to say. You have to be proud of yourself and create your own way of living. And companies and business are exactly the same. Yeah. So start to understand where you are, be proud of your next step, be proud of yourself, define your sense of directions and move on. Study complexity, sense making, be open-minded with methods. Waterfall did great things in the past. Nowadays, we blame a lot of things about waterfall, about a lot of things that we gain in our history. There are also methods like waterfall. So don't blame about the past. There are good things to learn from this and to take your next step. So I think that's this page.
Fantastic, Alex. Ian, Alex of Emergy, thank you so much for joining us today. I think we were just over our 1 hour of time for today. I certainly found that fascinating and interesting. I'm sure our audience did too. And again, thank you for having shared that with us today. To our audience that joined, thank you for having joined today's Insight session at DVT. Please look out for the next one. And I'm sure on behalf of all of you, I will just again voice my thanks to you, Alex. Ian, greatly appreciated for what you presented today.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Weekend.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.